When Hogwarts Legacy launched in 2023, it was protected by the most advanced anti-piracy system ever created. A protection system that had delayed cracks for weeks, sometimes even months. And yet, just 10 days later, Hogwarts Legacy had already been cracked. But this wasn't the first game this happened to, and it certainly won't be the last. So, how do hackers keep breaking through? What does it actually take to crack a modern game? And why, after decades of fighting piracy, has nobody managed to stop it? Contrary to what Hollywood would have you believe, cracking a game isn't about guessing passwords or hacking into company servers. Most of the time, the process starts with something much simpler: buying the game. Because before hackers can remove a game's protection, they first need access to the exact same files every legitimate customer receives. More specifically, the EXE file. Think of the EXE as the game's brain. It's responsible for launching the game, executing instructions, and communicating with other services running in the background. And for publishers, it's also the perfect place to enforce ownership checks. And that's where the first major obstacle appears. DRM, short for Digital Rights Management, is a broad term for technologies designed to prevent unauthorized copying and distribution. In simple terms, DRM's job is to verify that you have a legitimate copy of the game before allowing you to play. For example, Steam's DRM wrapper simply forces the Steam client to open first before launching the game. Many publishers take this a step further by requiring their own launchers, which act as another layer of DRM by verifying ownership before allowing the game to run. And while that might already sound impossible to get around, Valve itself admits that Steam's DRM isn't designed to stop determined attackers, but rather casual piracy, such as simply copying the game files into another computer. But in 2010, when Ubisoft introduced its always-online DRM system with Assassin's Creed 2, many believed the industry had finally found a real answer to piracy. The game constantly communicated with Ubisoft's servers, verifying whether the player was legitimate or not. On paper, it sounded almost impossible to crack. So you can imagine the surprise when a hacking group released a working crack just 9 days later. And the crack wasn't created by attacking Ubisoft's infrastructure. It was created by understanding how the game worked. Remember, the hackers already have the game's files. And somewhere inside that EXE file is the code responsible for checking ownership. The challenge is finding it and removing it. That's where reverse engineering comes in. Using tools like OllyDbg, hackers can watch the game execute code in real time. Every function it calls, every decision it makes, and most importantly, the exact moment it verifies whether the player owns a legitimate copy of the game. Before they could get to that point, however, there's just one major problem. When developers create a game, they write it using source code, human-readable instructions written in languages like C++ or C#. But before release, it's compiled into machine code, a language humans aren't supposed to understand. And here's where a tool called IDA Pro comes in. Think of it as a translator. It takes that machine code and converts it into a format which humans can actually read and understand. By combining IDA Pro with a debugger, hackers slowly piece together the puzzle. They follow the ownership checks, trace the communication between the game and its launcher, and identify the exact sections of code responsible for authentication. Once they find those checks, the goal is simply to remove them and convince the game that the verification process has already been completed. And for publishers, this became a problem. And that's where Denuvo changed the game. Because every time a hacker opens a debugger or begins reverse engineering the game, Denuvo is already working against them. It fills the game with fake code paths, scrambled logic, and traps, making it much harder to reverse engineer. When the game is running, large sections of the code remain hidden and only become available when they're actually needed. For example, if you're in a cutscene, only the code responsible for that cutscene may be exposed. Enter a gunfight, and a different section becomes available instead. The game is only revealing small pieces of itself, while keeping the rest hidden. It can even generate a unique fingerprint tied to the player's hardware, making the protected copy more difficult to analyze. So, how do hackers get around that? Patience. A lot of patience. Every time Denuvo decrypts a small piece of code, hackers capture it and save it elsewhere. But because Denuvo only reveals the code needed for a specific situation, hackers may need to play through every mission, complete every ending, trigger every animation, and explore every corner of the game just to collect as many pieces as possible. Once they have those fragments, they use tools like IDA Pro to analyze the recovered code and remove Denuvo's traps and security functions. But this is where things become even more difficult, because if they leave behind even a single line or patch the wrong piece of code, the game can become almost unplayable. That's why some cracked versions of games have launched with major issues. Pirated copies of Assassin's Creed Mirage were notorious for crashing every 30 minutes, while cracked versions of Metal Gear Solid became known for a prologue crash glitch that prevented players from progressing normally. A cracked game that's filled with glitches isn't really a win for anyone. The hacker spent weeks, sometimes months, defeating one of the most sophisticated protection systems ever built. And the person who downloaded it still can't play it properly. Yet, despite all of this, piracy never disappeared. And after decades of fighting it, the industry still can't even agree on what piracy actually is. For some publishers, the answer is simple. Piracy is theft. Money that never reaches the developers who spent years building the game, but others see something very different. In 2011, Valve co-founder Gabe Newell said that piracy is almost always a service problem. His argument was that if a pirate can offer a game anywhere in the world at any time, with no region locks, then the pirate is simply providing a better service. And Gabe believed he'd already seen it happen.
So, an example where that was really clear is Russia, right? Everybody in the United States knows that Russians are pirates. There's no point in making your product available in Russia because all they'll do is pirate it. You know, when the reality is that the pirates in Russia were actually doing a much better job than the games companies themselves in localizing the product and making it available. So if I wanted the product and I didn't want to wait 6 months to get the product, and if I wanted it in Russian, I was going to have to go to a pirate simply because I couldn't get it any other way. And as soon as the product became available at the same time that it was available in Australia or the UK or the United States, and it was localized in Russia, all of a sudden our piracy problems in Russia disappeared. So it really is a question of offering a viewing.
And that's the strange reality of piracy. Because to some people, piracy is a crime. To others, it's a necessity. And maybe that's why nobody has ever found an answer that satisfies everyone. Because no matter how much technology changes, it can never change the reasons why people pirate games in the first place. Regardless of where you stand, piracy has left a permanent mark on the gaming industry. It changed how games are protected, challenged what it really means to own a game, and even influenced the way publishers think about selling them. And maybe that's why this conversation has never really been about piracy alone, because for a lot of players, the decision doesn't begin with piracy. It begins with a price tag, with looking at a game you want to play and wondering whether you can really afford it. That question has become more important than ever over the past few years. Because the same industry that spent decades trying to stop people from stealing their games spent just as long figuring out how to make you comfortable paying more for them. And if that story sounds interesting to you, click the video on screen.